The afternoon sun blazed mercilessly over Ojike village, turning the red earth roads into shimmering ribbons of heat. The air hung thick with the mingled scents of smoked fish, roasting plantains, and the rich, damp aroma of the nearby river. In the bustling marketplace, women balanced baskets of produce on their heads with practiced ease, their colorful wrappers swaying rhythmically as they moved between stalls. Children darted through the crowds, their laughter ringing out as they played games of tag, their bare feet kicking up little puffs of red dust that settled on everything like a fine powder. Nneka adjusted the heavy basket of ripe plantains balanced precariously on her head, her strong arms glistening with sweat in the oppressive heat. At 19, she moved with the effortless grace that made her the envy of other girls in the village. Her dark skin glowing with youth, her full lips often curved in an easy smile that revealed perfect white teeth, her laughter like the joyful tinkling of stones in a flowing stream. She was the pride of her father's household, the favorite daughter of Chief Okonkwo, and as such, expected to uphold the strict traditions of their people with dignity and obedience. But today, her attention kept drifting away from her market duties, pulled irresistibly toward the unfamiliar figure haggling with old Mama Chidi over a sack of yams near the center of the marketplace. He stood a full head taller than most men in the market, his broad shoulders straining against the fine embroidery of his indigo tunic. His skin, darker than the rich earth after the first rains, glistened with sweat that traced the strong planes of his face. When he laughed at something, Mama Chidi said, throwing his head back to reveal strong white teeth, the rich, deep sound sent an unexpected shiver down Nneka's spine. Who is that? She whispered to Adanna, her closest friend since childhood, who was busy inspecting a basket of fiery red peppers at the next stall. Adanna followed her gaze and immediately sucked her teeth in disapproval. That's Emeka, the trader from Umudioka, comes every full moon with his fancy goods and sweet words that make foolish girls forget their senses. She gave Nneka a sharp, knowing look. Don't even think about it. Your father would skin you alive if he caught you looking twice at an outsider. Nneka felt her cheeks grow warm beneath her friend's scrutiny. I was just curious, she lied, the words tasting bitter on her tongue, even as her eyes were drawn back to the stranger's imposing figure. But curiosity turned to something far more dangerous as the weeks passed. Each time Emeka's trading caravan arrived, with its colorful banners fluttering in the breeze and the rhythmic bells tied to the donkeys' harnesses, Nneka found more excuses to visit the market. At first, it was just stolen glances across crowded stalls, their eyes meeting briefly before darting away, a silent game of cat and mouse that left her breathless. Then came brief conversations when she pretended to examine his wares, running her fingers over the colorful beads from the north that caught the sunlight like drops of captured rainbows, inhaling the sharp scent of rare spices that made her nose tingle and her eyes water, marveling at fabrics softer than anything woven in Ojike that slid through her fingers like water. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon in shades of molten orange and bruised purple, Nneka lingered by the river to wash her wraps long after the other women had returned to the village. The water flowed gently around her strong hands, carrying away the day's dust from the brightly colored fabric. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear his approach until his shadow fell across the water's surface, startling her so badly she nearly dropped the cloth she was washing. You shouldn't be out here alone at dusk, a deep voice said from behind her. Nneka turned to find Emeka standing just a few paces away, his expression unreadable in the fading light. The crocodiles grow bold when the sun sets, he continued, taking a cautious step closer, his bare feet making no sound on the packed earth. Nneka's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, her mouth suddenly dry. I know these waters, she lied, her voice barely above a whisper as she fought to steady her breathing. He crouched beside her, close enough that she could smell the sandalwood oil in his hair and see the faint scar that traced his left eyebrow like a pale thread against his dark skin. Your father is Chief Okonkwo, isn't he? She nodded, suddenly unable to meet his gaze, her fingers twisting nervously in the wet fabric. Then you know what would happen if we were seen together, Emeka said softly, his dark eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. The unspoken words hung between them like ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. The laws of Ojike were clear and unforgiving. Marriage outside the village was strictly forbidden. Those who broke this sacred law faced banishment or worse. Just last year, a young couple had been caught trying to flee to a neighboring village. The boy had been tied to the great Iroko tree and lashed until his back ran red with blood, while the girl had been stripped of her belongings and cast into the wilderness beyond the village borders. Their anguished cries had haunted Nneka's dreams for weeks. And yet, when Emeka's fingers brushed against hers as he helped her gather her washing from the river's edge, Nneka didn't pull away. The touch sent a current of warmth through her that had nothing to do with the evening heat, a sensation so foreign yet so right that it stole her breath away. Their secret meetings became more frequent, more daring with each passing moon. Brief conversations turned into stolen hours by the riverbank, where Emeka told her stories of distant lands that fired her imagination, of the great river that flowed all the way to the ocean, where water stretched as far as the eye could see, of cities where buildings touched the sky like the sacred Iroko tree grown to impossible heights, of markets so large one could get lost in them for days, each stall more wondrous than the last. In return, Nneka shared village gossip that made him laugh until tears shone in his eyes and taught him the secret meanings behind Ojike's many festivals and traditions. The stories passed down from mother to daughter for generations. With each clandestine encounter, the warnings from Adanna grew more urgent, her dark eyes filled with growing concern. You're playing with fire, Adanna hissed one afternoon as they prepared cassava in Nneka's hut, the rhythmic pounding of the pestle against the mortar matching the frantic beat of Nneka's heart. Obi has been asking about you. He's noticed your absences during market days, and you know how he feels about you. Nneka's stomach twisted into knots at the mention of Obi, the village's strongest warrior, who had made no secret of his desire to marry her. His broad chest, crisscrossed with scars from battles fought to protect Ojike, was a source of pride for the villagers, and his skill with the spear was unmatched. What did you tell him? That you've been helping your aunt with her new baby, Adanna said, her expression darkening as she wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. But lies only stretch so far before they snap. If your father finds out, he won't, Nneka interrupted, the words coming out sharper than she intended, her pounding growing more forceful as her frustration mounted. Adanna's eyes softened with concern as she reached out to steal Nneka's hands. You're my sister in all blood, which is why I must tell you this. Whatever fantasy you're spinning with that trader, it cannot end well. Our laws are clear. Our traditions are sacred. Is a few moments of stolen happiness worth losing everything? Your family, your home, your place in this village. Nneka opened her mouth to reply, but the words died in her throat. How could she explain the way her heart raced when Emeka smiled, or how the sound of his voice made her skin prickle with awareness? These were feelings she barely understood herself, emotion too large and complicated to put into words. That night, under a sky heavy with stars that seemed close enough to touch, Emeka pulled her close beneath the baobab tree, his strong arms wrapping around her as if he could shield her from the entire world. the rough bark pressed against her back as he leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. I can't keep doing this, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Every time I leave Ojike, I fear it will be the last time I see you. The thought of you being forced to marry that warrior. His voice cracked, and he pulled back slightly to look into her eyes, his own shining with unshed tears in the moonlight. It's tearing me apart. Nneka closed her eyes, breathing in his familiar scent, sandalwood, and something uniquely him that she'd come to associate with safety and belonging. What are you saying? She whispered, though she already knew the answer, had seen it coming like the first storm clouds of the rainy season gathering on the horizon. There's a priest in Umudioka, he said, his hands tightening around hers. A good man who understands that love shouldn't be bound by village borders. He'll marry us in secret. We could leave in 3 days before the next full moon when the trading caravan returned. The proposal should have terrified her. The thought of leaving her family, her home, everything she'd ever known should have sent her running back to the safety of her father's compound. But when she looked into Emeka's eyes, so full of hope and fear and longing, all she felt was a strange, quiet certainty settling in her bones like the first drops of rain soaking into parched earth. Before she could answer, a branch cracked in the undergrowth nearby, the sound as sharp as a whip in the still night air. They froze, their bodies going rigid with alarm, their breath catching in unison. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable rustle of someone moving through the bushes. Emeka reacted instantly, pushing Nneka behind him as he faced the approaching threat, his body coiled like a spring ready to release. But when the figure emerged from the shadows, it wasn't Obi or any of the village elders as they'd feared. It was little Chima, the potter's son, his eyes wide with shock as he took in the intimate scene before him, the half-eaten piece of sugarcane and his hand forgotten. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The only sounds were the frantic chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl from across the river. Then, with a gasp that seemed too loud in the quiet night, Chima turned and ran, his small feet pounding against the hard earth as he disappeared into the darkness toward the village. Nneka's blood turned to ice in her veins, her hands flying to her mouth in horror. He'll tell his mother, she whispered, her voice trembling. By morning, the whole village will know. Emeka's grip on her hand tightened almost painfully, his face grim in the moonlight. Then we leave tonight, he said, his voice firm with resolve. The escape was frantic, their movements hurried yet silent as shadows. Nneka slipped back to her heart just long enough to gather a few precious belongings, her mother's coral beads that had been passed down through generations, a small carving of the river goddess that had protected their family for as long as anyone could remember, the bracelet Adanna had given her at their coming-of-age ceremony that symbolized their eternal friendship. She left behind a lifetime of memories without allowing herself to look back, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might give them away. They moved like ghosts through the sleeping village, every rustle of leaves sounding like pursuit, every distant animal cry making them freeze in terror. The normally familiar paths between the huts seemed alien in the darkness, each shadow a potential threat. When they finally reached the edge of the village where the cultivated fields gave way to wild forest, a figure stepped into their path from the darkness, blocking their escape. Nneka's heart stopped, her breath catching in her throat. Her father stood before them, his face unreadable in the moonlight, his ceremonial staff gripped tightly in one hand like a weapon. The silver streaks in his hair gleamed in the pale light, and the lines around his eyes seemed deeper than she remembered. For a long, agonizing moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were Nneka's ragged breathing and the distant call of a night bird. Then, to her utter shock, Chief Okonkwo stepped aside, clearing their path to the forest, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Go, he said, his voice rough with emotion, before I change my mind. Tears streamed down Nneka's face as she pressed her forehead to her father's feet in a final gesture of respect and farewell. The dust warmed beneath her skin. When she rose, he was already walking away, his shoulders bowed as if under the weight of the world, his staff dragging slightly in the dirt as he disappeared into the night. The journey to Umudioka was harder than Nneka could have imagined. The forest at night teemed with unseen dangers, the eerie howls of hyenas that raised the hair on her arms, the occasional cough of a leopard that sent them scrambling for cover, the ever-present fear of pursuit that had them jumping at every sound. Thorns tore at their clothes and skin, leaving angry red marks that stung with sweat, and more than once they had to hide breathlessly as search parties from Ojike passed frighteningly close, their torches flickering between the trees like malevolent spirits. When they finally crossed into Umudioka territory at dawn, Nneka's feet were bleeding, her body aching with exhaustion, her spirit raw with grief for all she'd left behind. But Emeka's arms around her felt like coming home, and that was enough to keep her moving forward, one painful step at a time. Their welcome in Umudioka was far from warm. Emeka's people viewed her with open suspicion, their hospitality tempered by distrust of this outsider who had stolen one of their sons. The priest, an ancient man with kind eyes clouded by cataracts, agreed to perform the marriage ceremony, but only under cover of darkness when few would witness it. Even then, Nneka could feel the disapproving stares of the villagers who came to observe the union, their whispers like the hiss of snakes in the tall grass. The first months in Umudioka were the hardest of Nneka's life. Without Emeka's steady presence, she might have broken under the weight of homesickness and isolation. She missed Adanna's raucous laughter that could light up the darkest day, her father's stern but loving presence that had been the foundation of her life. Even the familiar rhythms of daily life in Ojike that she had once taken for granted. The morning prayers at the family shrine, the communal work in the fields, the festivals that marked the turning of the seasons. The food here tasted different. The songs had unfamiliar melodies that left her tongue-tied, and the gods went by different names that fell foreign in her mouth. Then, one rainy season morning, when the air was thick with the promise of storms, as Nneka walked in the garden behind their small hut, her back aching from the unaccustomed labor, a familiar voice called her name. Adanna stood at the edge of the clearing, her traveling clothes dusty and torn, her face lined with exhaustion, but her smile as bright as the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Took me long enough to find you," she said, her voice cracking with emotion as she dropped her travel pack to the ground with a thud. The reunion was tearful, the news bittersweet. Obi had married another girl from a neighboring village in a lavish ceremony that had lasted 3 days. Chief Okonkwo had told the villagers that Nneka had gone to care for a sick relative in a distant land, and though some suspected the truth, none dared challenge the chief's word. Life in Ojike had moved on without her, the rhythms of the village continuing as they had for generations. But I couldn't, Adanna admitted later, accepting the cup of palm wine the Nneka offered as they sat by the fire, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls of the small hut. Not without saying for myself that you were happy. As Nneka looked around at the home she'd built with Emeka, at the garden she'd planted with her own hands, now bursting with vegetables that had seemed impossible to grow when she first arrived, at the new sleeping mat she'd woven to replace the one they'd shared when first arriving. Her fingers raw from the unaccustomed work, at the gentle swell of her belly where their child grew, a living testament to their love. She realized with the sudden clarity that she was not the carefree happiness of her girlhood, but something deeper, harder one. A happiness forged through sacrifice and choice, through leaving one family to build another, through learning to find home in a person rather than a place. When their daughter was born at the height of the dry season, when the earth was parched and cracked like an old woman's hands, they named her Amaechi, who knows what the gods have ordained. And as Nneka held her child for the first time, watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of gold and pink through the open doorway, the baby's tiny fingers wrapped around hers with surprising strength, she understood with perfect clarity that some loves were worth breaking every rule for. The ancestors might frown upon their union. The villagers might whisper behind their backs. The gods themselves might judge their choices. But in this moment, with Emeka's arms around her and their daughter's soft breaths against her chest, none of that mattered. She had chosen her path, and she would walk it without regret, one short step at a time, into whatever future lay ahead.